Alright guys, BLM here, and we're back with a new video. In this video, I'll be talking about the development cycle of every main series game in the Assassin's Creed series up to this point, and discuss the ramifications of that cycle. So I might as well mention this now. This video will include spoilers for the entire series, so yeah, don't watch it if you don't want to get spoiled. Now, a lot of this information has been speculated for a while, and we did get pretty concrete information through developer interviews. But recently at GDC 2018, Ubisoft officially revealed a chart that detailed their entire development cycle up until Assassin's Creed Origins. So obviously that will be the main source for this video. I'm only going to be talking about the core teams here, as it would just take forever to talk about every subsidiary that worked on Assassin's Creed. So let's get started with 2004, right after the development of Prince of Persia's Sands of Time, which was a pretty big critical and commercial success for Ubisoft. Creative director Patrice Désilets was tasked with working on a new Prince of Persia game for the next generation of consoles, and this developed into a spin-off called Prince of Persia Assassins. However, once Ubisoft realized that they could make their own IP instead of having to pay licensing fees for Prince of Persia, they decided to make it into their own new IP. This became Assassin's Creed. Now, Assassin's Creed 1 was developed by a team that is now referred to as Montreal 1. And the game did come out after a 3-year development cycle and was released in 2007. Now, immediately after the release of Assassin's Creed 1, Assassin's Creed 2 started development with the same team and creative director, also with a shortened development cycle of only 2 years. And for what they wanted to do with Assassin's Creed 2, this simply wasn't enough time. When AC2 was eventually released, it included 12 sequences. The original plan was for 14, with sequences 12 and 13 being cut from the game and later released as DLCs, which are now known as Battle for Lee and Bonfire of the Vanities. Rome was supposed to be a third major city within the game, similar to how AC1 had 3 main cities. It was in this game as a set piece in the Vatican. At the end of 2009, AC2 came out in this reduced form. But this is where the development gets a bit more interesting, where after the release of Assassin's Creed 2, 2 Assassin's Creed games started development. Montreal 1 split into 2 different teams. The new team, being Montreal 2, started work on Assassin's Creed 3, which we will talk about a bit later. But Montreal 1, with Patrice Désilets, started work on a direct sequel to Assassin's Creed 2 in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, using a lot of assets from Assassin's Creed 1 and 2, and using some concepts from the initial plan of the ending of Assassin's Creed 2, allowing them to build the entirety of Rome. But with this did come some last-minute changes to Assassin's Creed 2, with the most notable one being the fate of Rodrigo Borgia. As a theory I've always had is that Assassin's Creed 2 was supposed to end in 1503 instead of 1499, with the death of Rodrigo Borgia, as further evidenced by the Renaissance book, which was written with an initial outline of Assassin's Creed 2's story, and the book did end in 1503. Now sadly, Patrice Désilets, the original creative director of Assassin's Creed, did leave the series in the middle of the production of Brotherhood due to creative differences, and while it's not confirmed, I do still think most of Brotherhood is what he initially envisioned, and he did also help with the conception of AC3's story before he left. So Brotherhood was supposed to be the end of Ezio's story, but now let's move on to 2011. So here in 2011, we have AC3's second year in development, but we also have another game. At the beginning of the year, Assassin's Creed Revelations begins development after the cancellation of Assassin's Creed Lost Legacy, which was a planned 3DS game that involved Ezio traveling to Masyaf, connecting Altair and Ezio's stories. These concepts were brought over to Revelations, which was set to be developed within a year, coming out at the end of 2011, to hold over fans until Assassin's Creed 3. Obviously, this game uses a lot of assets from Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and Brotherhood, and was developed with the help of multiple teams, but the lead development team here was a new team within Ubisoft Montreal, now called Montreal 3. Who are the first development team that we've talked about that is still currently working on Assassin's Creed to this day. I feel like this is the first and only time that they actually go for story over setting. Usually Assassin's Creed first picks out a setting and then builds a story around it. With this game, it really feels like they were focusing on Ezio's story and then figuring out a setting afterwards, which is something I wish that they did more often. Another strange thing here, though, is the fact that, again, this was developed within a year, and this game started development 1 year after Assassin's Creed 3 already started development, which more than likely means that the story for AC3 was already written, meaning that Revelations had to fit in between Brotherhood and AC3, and that's pretty much why the modern day is so almost non-existent in this game. Having Desmond in a coma and having him meet Subject 16. There are the Desmond's Journey missions that do give background on Desmond's character, which I think was really needed, but at the end of the day, all this was because that they couldn't really move the modern day forward, as the plan was already made for Assassin's Creed 3. But now to talk about what happened after the development of Brotherhood, Montreal 1, the team that developed Assassin's Creed 1, 2, and Brotherhood, moved on to their next game, which would be the first fully next-gen game for Assassin's Creed. Now this game ended up becoming Assassin's Creed Unity, which was very clearly already the plan by the end of Brotherhood's development, as there's a very blatant Easter egg at the end of Brotherhood referring to the French Revolution. Now, I feel like people forget that Unity was actually in development for one of the longest periods of time out of all the Assassin's Creed games. People only think of its terrible launch, but in my opinion, that came from poor direction and also a lot of interference from Ubisoft themselves. Now, this game won't come out for another 4 years, so we'll just talk about it a bit later. Now let's move on to 2012, which is probably one of the crazier years for Assassin's Creed in terms of its development cycle. Obviously, as I just said, we had Unity still in development. We had Assassin's Creed 3 in its third year of development, getting ready to come out. And we had 2 other games start development during this year. So, as I said with AC3, it came out after 3 years of development, being developed by Montreal 2, who never made another Assassin's Creed game ever again. And this game uses a new engine, and obviously AC3 also ends the Desmond saga, as after this, the modern day's role in the games is greatly reduced, largely due to Ubisoft catering to a more casual audience. Now, while not a main series game, I might as well talk about this as well. AC3 Liberation started development at the beginning of 2012 and was finished developing by the end of it. It came out alongside Assassin's Creed 3. And was released for the PlayStation Vita. Now, this was developed by Ubisoft Sofia, who developed another Assassin's Creed game that we'll talk about later. Now, it uses a lot of assets from Assassin's Creed 3, and also shares a lot of assets with another game that started development this year, and that is Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which began development right after Revelations came out. Developed by the same team in Montreal 3, Assassin's Creed 4 was given 2 years to develop, being the first main series game after the Desmond saga. It also reuses assets from Assassin's Creed 3, but has more of a focus on the naval gameplay that was introduced in Assassin's Creed 3. The game itself stars Edward Kenway, the grandfather of Connor, and this is the first and only time up to this point in Assassin's Creed history where a pre-established character at the time development started was chosen to be the main character of the next game. Edward was already a character from the book Assassin's Creed Forsaken, which was later slightly retconned for this game, but they were still able to fit him in as a pirate during the golden age of piracy. Now let's move on to 2013, where not much really happened. I mean, Unity has its third year of development, while Assassin's Creed 4 had its second and final year of development, which was pretty much the calm before the storm, as 2014 is a pretty crazy year for Assassin's Creed. So coming into 2014, we have Assassin's Creed Unity in development again for its fourth and final year this time. And since the release of Black Flag, we also get 3 new Assassin's Creed games in development that we'll all talk about later, but we'll first start by talking about Unity, which had a really strange development cycle. I mean, it's well known that Montreal 1 had a lot of trouble with Unity. A lot of this blame could go towards the creative director, Alex Amancio, who previously directed Revelations, but I personally don't think he deserves all the blame. Again, he didn't join until mid-2012. The game was only a year and a half away from being finished at that point. There was another creative director beforehand that was let go, or left, I don't know. But either way, I mean, from what I can tell, it really feels like Alex Amancio was just trying to fix things and wasn't able to do it in time. Now, 4 years should be enough time for a AAA title, which is why I do understand why Ubisoft really wanted this game to come out in 2014, as again, it was supposed to be the first next-gen game for Assassin's Creed, but they should have waited. I mean, again, it wasn't done. It simply wasn't done. I mean, they were able to get it done within the next few months. So, I mean, I think they really should have waited a few months to release it, but obviously they didn't. For what they were trying to do, I felt like this game was just a bit too ambitious, and they weren't able to figure out this new engine yet. So it's a shame that they didn't get just a little bit more time to polish out the game. Something that I also find really strange about Unity is its integration of the modern day and sages. As I mentioned before, this game started development after the development of Brotherhood finished, but before AC4 started development. which is where the concept of sages really came from. And there's a major difference between the sages in these two games. Bart Roberts is completely different than Germain. And I feel like the concept of sages was created for Unity, but when they got introduced in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, they decided to change some details that didn't make their way back to Unity, such as the appearance, the reincarnation of Aita, that sort of stuff. Now for the modern day, which is almost non-existent, I feel like this proves even more that Ubisoft had just been trying to get rid of the modern day for a while at this point, from well before AC3 came out. Now, this was the last game developed by Montreal 1, which was the team that started the entire series. But again, this game was just such a failure in Ubisoft's eyes. Now, the failure of Unity here will fundamentally change Ubisoft's approach on Assassin's Creed from this point forward. Obviously, at the point that Unity already came out, these 3 games that we're about to talk about already started development. But at this current point, it does feel like Ubisoft's learned from their mistakes from a development standpoint and don't want to repeat it. So now for the other 3 games. One of these games started development this year and also was released by the end of the year, and that is Assassin's Creed Rogue, which was made to hold over fans from the previous generation of consoles, and was made to be a conclusion to the Kenway saga, while also connecting itself to Unity. Rogue was developed by Ubisoft Sofia, who previously developed Liberation, and started development right after Black Flag came out. Now, this game obviously uses a lot of assets from AC3 and Black Flag, which was really necessary to create this within a year. Though you did obviously have help from a lot of other studios. Now, I'll talk about the elephant in the room, the retcons. Shay did not appear in AC3 because he did not exist at the time. And they very sloppily tried to explain it here, where he was searching for a precursor box during that time period, which is really dumb because if you really think about it, 1, why wouldn't he return to America if he knew that his entire order was being massacred? And 2, this happens in 1776. He finds the precursor box in 1776, 6 years before the end of Assassin's Creed 3. Like, it makes no sense. It's like as if Richard Fries, who wrote this and completely forgot about the timeline of the entire series. And another thing that's really dumb is the Charles Dorian scene at the end of the game, where Charles Dorian says, Connor and his assassins. Despite, again, this being 1776 when Achilles was still mentor. In 1776, Connor had just killed Thomas Hickey. So it's really strange that Charles Dorian is bringing up Connor instead of Achilles during this scene. And another thing that's pretty dumb here is the fact that the Assassin Purge was already detailed in Assassin's Creed 3, happening in 1763. However, in this game, it happens 3 years earlier. And I love how the wiki tries to explain it by making it so that both events happen, but this is just dumb. As this means that the Templars literally had Achilles dead to rights 2 times, and we're like, now we'll let him live for no reason. Now for the question, why isn't Shay in Unity? Simple. Unity was already 3 years into development at this point, and it was too late to add Shay into the story, especially with all the problems Unity was already having. And what's strange here is that despite these 2 games coming out at the same time, this is technically a retcon. At the time that Unity was written, it was not planned for Shay to be Arno's father's killer. The Unity team didn't really seem to care who his father's killer was, as to be honest, it wasn't integral to the story. All you really needed to know was that, yeah, his father was killed. But really, Arno's motivations throughout the entire story there were Elise and redemption for the death of Delaserre. So I do still find it kind of strange that they added that to the end of Rogue, where Charles Dorian is killed, but it really has no effect on really anything. Now, after finishing with Rogue, Ubisoft Sofia moved on to help the production of the next game that we'll talk about, which was the game developed by Montreal 3 that started development immediately after the development of Black Flag, and at this point it was called Assassin's Creed Empire, but it would later become known as Assassin's Creed Origins. And this game was initially slated to have a 3-year development cycle coming out in 2016. However, due to the disaster that Unity was, it was eventually given an extra year of development, so it eventually came out in 2017. It was also within this year that we also got a very early leaked screenshot of some sort of, it looked like an Egyptian game being worked on within Ubisoft, that there was an Easter egg of within Black Flag, which I personally think was probably the initial build for Empire. So obviously this was within the first year of development. And things radically changed from this point, but again, we'll talk about this a bit later. This game still doesn't come out for another 4 years. Now, the final game that started development within this year was developed by Ubisoft Quebec, a newer team that only developed DLCs up to this point, having developed Tyranny King Washington and Freedom Cry, but they were tasked with making their own game within 2 years, and that eventually became Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which obviously reused a lot of assets from Assassin's Creed Unity. So I feel like now we might as well move on to 2015, which, like 2013, was kind of bare. After the release of Unity, no new games started development, again, due to the complete disaster that Unity was. And again, Ubisoft completely changed their development cycle, reducing Assassin's Creed to only 2 main teams in Montreal 3 and Quebec. And that's currently how the series is run up to now, though things could obviously change depending on how 2020 plays out. But during this year, Origins continued development and was officially given an extra year development after Ubisoft decided to take 2016 off. While Syndicate finishes development this year and comes out, to be honest, there's not much to talk about. Again, Syndicate's pretty disconnected from the rest of the series. There are minor connections to previous games like the Kenway Mansion, but again, that was just a late addition that they added just for fan service. It does continue the Phoenix Project storyline, but again, it's dropped completely after this due to them moving the Juno storyline to the comics so that they can have a soft reboot in the main series. So yeah, I mean, this is where the information that we know really starts to wind down, as 2016, again, is the first year since 2008 without a main series Assassin's Creed game. And also, as I said, Origins was initially supposed to be released during this year, but it didn't because of the Unity situation. But I might as well talk about this now, though, that Origins was supposed to be a soft reboot. The original Empire leak that was released at the beginning of 2016 did state that Empire would be influenced by The Witcher 3 and Dark Souls, and include more of a focus on RPG mechanics. Now, The Witcher 3 didn't come out until mid-2015, so likely things changed in between this period. Also, another thing I should mention is that initially the writer for this game was going to be Darby McDevitt, who previously written games like Revelations and Black Flag. However, he supposedly had creative differences during development of this game and decided to leave the project. Now for Ubisoft Quebec, who, after the release of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, began working on their next Assassin's Creed game, which would reuse assets from Origins and even further implement RPG mechanics and even further try to be a Witcher clone, and that eventually becomes Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which was given a 3-year development cycle to be released in 2018. Almost it. I mean, again, there's not much to say here. In 2017, we had the release of Assassin's Creed Origins at the end of the year, and Odyssey had its second full year of development, and in 2018, we got the release of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is where we are now. Now, we do know that we will not be getting an Assassin's Creed game in 2019, and I feel like this is probably the way that Assassin's Creed's going to move forward from this point on. We're more than likely going to get Assassin's Creed in a 3-year cycle now. We're more than likely going to get 1 year of Montreal 3, 1 year of Quebec, a 1-year break, and then back to Montreal 3, Quebec. That is until they decide to change this development cycle, which it doesn't seem like they're changing as of right now. Though, at the end of the day, obviously this is just speculation. We do pretty much know that there is going to be a 2020 game, though. And through the multiple interviews from Ubisoft executives that said that there's only 2 teams working on Assassin's Creed now, that more than likely means that the 2020 game will be developed by Montreal 3, which at this current point is codenamed Kingdom, and will involve Vikings. Now, whatever Montreal 3 is working on, they did start development of it right after Origins, as Ashraf Ismail has been openly working on a new game ever since the beginning of 2018, that we can only assume is Kingdom. 2021 will more than likely see the release of whatever Quebec is planning on doing, which will more than likely use a lot of assets from Kingdom. Now, each of these games will be given a 3-year development cycle. Kingdom more than likely started development at the very end of 2017, with it being released probably at the end of 2020. And the same thing with Quebec's game, where Odyssey came out at the end of 2018, and more than likely will come out at the end of 2021. I would not be surprised if they do end up adding in a new studio to this bunch. I did think that they were going to add in Ubisoft Sofia to this cycle, giving each game a 4-year development cycle, which seemed to work very well with Origins, but it doesn't really seem like that's what they're doing. So there we go. That is essentially the history of Assassin's Creed from a development standpoint, which is a series I find very fascinating to research about, as there were just so many games being juggled around at one point that does lead to a lot of inconsistencies between games. But to be honest, I do feel like that's going to start changing from this point on. As I said, at this current point, we only have 2 development teams who are on a set schedule with Assassin's Creed, so it doesn't really seem like we're going to get a lot of random games like Revelations or Rogue that start and end development before the release of much larger games. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say here. That's the entire video. Thank you for watching.